62. Listen to this. Only in God does my soul find rest. My life comes from God. Only God is my rock and my life, my stronghold, and I will not be shaken. Whew, that's some confidence. This sounds like it comes from a songwriter that has lived a lot of life and wants to pass on some wisdom to us. And I think that's what it is. Psalm 62 goes on about how wisdom is not to be trusted in people. War and violence are not to be trusted. Money is not to be trusted. Only, the psalmist says, can we really trust in God? And the psalmist, in her wisdom, invites us to think about that too. What does it look like to trust only God? Or maybe another way to say that is, what are the things that we do lean on that aren't really helpful in the long run? What politics or ego or ideas or beliefs or people are we dependent on that really won't help us in the end? We sing together, In God Alone.
In God alone is my soul at rest. Be at rest, my soul. In God alone is my soul at rest. Be at rest, my soul. In God alone is my soul at rest. In God at rest, 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 my soul.
Our scripture this morning is Psalm 62, taken from an interpretation called the Lucan Psalter. In God alone, my soul finds rest, for my deliverance comes from God, who alone is my rock, my salvation, my fortress. I will never be shaken. Only in God my deliverance, my glory, my refuge is in God. Trust in God always, my people. Pour out your hearts before God, our refuge. Humankind is but a breath. Mortals are just an illusion. Put them on the scales and the balance is thrown off. They weigh less than a breath. Do not trust in extortion or put false hopes in stolen goods. Do not set your heart on riches even when they increase. For God has said only one thing, twice I have heard it, that power belongs to God. Steadfast love is yours alone, Adonai. You repay all people according to their deeds. The reading of the Lord.
Good morning. May the words of my mouth and the reflections and meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing to you, Holy One. A young family with 2 children and a third on the way had a challenge to face. The mother, at 7 months along, became deathly ill. Doctors finally decided they would have to deliver the premature baby by C-section and attempt to save the mother's life. Thankfully, everything came out well. The baby and the mother survived, but during the height of the crisis, the wife's parents, who were there, were not Christians, were very upset. They were very distressed. They were even shaking at one point with grief and fear and just not knowing what was going to come next. And at one point, they lashed out at their son-in-law. How could he sit there so calmly when both mom and baby could die? They expressed this thought, and his reaction was this. You know, you think that I don't love your daughter, and I love your daughter very much, but the reason I can be calm is that I am trusting the Lord in this. He said he knew that God was holding them in their loving hands, and that is why he was able to sit quietly, sitting in God's peaceful presence. This day is about trusting in God alone. And in our text, I believe you heard those words earlier. And so I just love that we're back in the Psalms and learning more and more about those beautiful books of the Bible. And it's believed that the one that we're working with today, Psalm 62, was written by Jeduthun, and he was the chief musician, and he led the choir with songs. And all of the psalms are utilized. If you look at those, there are words that have been in some of our songs, or we can use them. Well, the words today were prompted by King David, and it's about his relationship with God. And at this time, when King David is alive, he would be thinking probably that he is a king, he can sit back on his laurels, he can rest. He is in a position of power. He might even feel secure with his riches because he has many. Yet that is not the case. His advisors have betrayed him. His son Absalom is trying to force him out of office. And he would think, and I mean, at this point, you would think, well, with all of this going on, that David would be bitter, that he would feel like that everybody was against him. Even his own family was trying to take over. And when we talk about take over in this time, we're talking about killing your own father so that you could be king. Facing that kind of dilemma, most would be questioning God, asking, why is this happening? Be angry at God. But David did not. Instead, he sings praises to the Lord. He has faith. So much so, he describes God as his rock. If someone is facing this kind of struggle and has strayed away or is strong in their faith, I really want to know more about him. So let's consider some of the anchoring points that our psalm today has for us. God is my rock. What do we know about rocks? Well, I know we have phrases in our day-to-day activities that will refer to rocks. He or she is rock solid. When the chips are down, projects need to be completed, they are the go-to people, for they get the job done. I hope you have people like that in your life. But when I think of the rock that David might be using to describe God, I think of granite, of marble, something that is so solid that it's almost impossible that we could even fathom that it could be moved. Something that is hard, something that we know that would be there. And we know from our reading that both David thinks of God as a solid rock and that God is always available. God, the go-to source when things are tough. God, a fortress of strength, able to take on the biggest of challenges. God, a presence stronger than any earthly storm, stronger than the hardest of rocks, yet gentle enough to lovingly hold us in his hands. This text today also has the word shaky and fear. Why would someone shake with fear? Usually, it's when we come up against something that we can't save ourselves from. During my divorce, I found myself feeling shaky a lot. I would feel at times like I had this shimmying in my heart. I sought counseling from a Christian counselor and had the courage to share with her one day that I had this physical symptom in my heart. It just felt shaky in there. And she asked me what it was like, and I said, well, like when you kind of tap Jell-O and it has that jiggly, that's how it felt in my heart. My hands weren't shaking, but there was just this shimmy sensation that stayed with me for a long time. Well, she encouraged me to explore and embrace the shaky. Then she talked to me about the many states that Jell-O could be found in. It starts out as powder, we add liquid to it, and then we let it sit up and it turns solid. Well, she said, think about that. In all those stages, there's a solidity that you can find. And then she shared that, we want to remember that our bodies are amazing things and that they're our tools as well. So when we listen and we talk with God, we do find and get answers. And sometimes things have to be shaken up. We are so much in our heads that sometimes our bodies literally have to respond, and God uses our body to get our attention. So she encouraged me to get a physical, and she encouraged me to continue to bring my concerns to God. I went to the doctor. There were no problems with my heart. So I talked to God about the shaky, the dark times, the hopelessness. And it looked something very similar to this poem I found by Angie Combs. Inside, hopelessness, darkness, nothing more, impossible to be less, silence, deepening silence. Only fears and despair echoing off cavern walls. I've been there, lived there. Have you? A hole so deep and so cold, no one to hear the screams. Hopeless, alone, exhausted. The longer the stay, the deeper it becomes. The darkness becomes thick, suffocating hopes, choking out dreams. Eyes scan the darkness, searching for light, searching for escape. Hopeless. Then it happens, so small, almost missed. Like the tide on the moon's rise, darkness begins to retreat. What is it? What is loosening the grip? The stranglehold, the suffocating power of darkness. This tiny beam of light, boring its way through the thick fog, is hope. Like an ant, small and overlooked, carries with strength 10 times its size. You reach out to it, desperate to escape. The ground slips underfoot. Fearful thoughts tug at your ankles, pulling you deeper into the mud. A voice far in the distance, stand there, stand on that rock. Hesitantly and cautiously. Obey, feet firmly planted, solid, standing tall. Faith steadies weak knees, raises higher. Light brightens, the darkness becomes shadows. Still looking up, longing for a rope, a ladder, a hand to pull me up out. The voice calls again, walk. Where, you ask? I am stuck here in the hole with the darkness. It is eager to come back, to strangle, to suffocate. Walk, you hear again, looking down toward the cavern wall, a place where the shadows have retreated, where hope's rays have landed. Walk, you take a step. The rock of faith stretches out in front, firm, supportive. With each step, hope shines brighter, the darkness much less so. Looking back, it becomes clear there was never a hole, never a cavern, never an inescapable abyss. It was only the darkness, a prison of its own. Lifting up hands, small radiant beams of light from your fingers. Shine, you hear the voice say, shine. With each step, hope shines beams of light into the dark prisons, scorching out darkness, melting out grips, the gripping coldness, like the guard with the keys walking along an endless row of dark cells, whispering, "Walk, walk," and glancing behind. Small and radiant beams of light shine in all directions. Soon, we shall all be free, free of the despair and the silence, the loneliness. For when we walk grounded on our faith, bearing our light, we become hope for others. Hope that shines, hope that encourages, hope that brightens. So that one day, perhaps soon, the prison will be empty, the fear will be gone, and hope shines upon all whom the darkness threatens. We are the hope of our world. Well, Romans 8:31 says, if God is for us, what could be against us? God is indeed our rock, our defense, and in his loving hands, our refuge. God can be our refuge in all areas of our lives, and especially during our shaky times. And David talks in this text about trust. Trust is defined as this firm belief in the reliability and truth and ability or strength of someone or something. That definition fits really good as a description of God. Noted author and preacher Charles Spurgeon says, we are not only to trust in God, we are to trust God at all times. Sometimes we find trust to be easier when times are good. There are so many times that we can go about and do things independently. I think we get used to the idea that we are doing fine, but guess what? Little by little and day by day, we drift from being in contact with God in all things. Trust was very much a part of the young father who was waiting peacefully while the doctors took care of his wife and unborn child. Trust is what I found when I embraced my shakiness and let God have control. Dr. Kreger, whom you will hear from in a few moments, delivered my daughter Jessica. During the delivery, he said, your baby is stressed, so we need to perform a C-section. In that moment, I realized I had no control over anything, and our baby was the most important thing. I prayed, into your hands I put my trust, God. Be with the doctors and nurses. I felt a peace that I could not have attained on my own. So thank you, Dr. Kreger and your team. And thank you, God. We will have many friends and many family members, many things we will put our trust in during our lifetime here. But we know from David the psalmist, we can't totally rely on humans and things of this world to help us feel secure. We are humans, and we do let each other down. I don't think we necessarily mean to, but we get busy. We pass out promises all the time, don't we? I'll have you over for dinner sometime, and you never call. I'll call you next week. A person's name comes to your mind, and you feel you should reach out, but then you get sidetracked. We get distracted, and the calls and the invitations and the notes are never sent. Life gets busy, but when we slow down, talk with God, and listen to that still small voice that says, drop a note, make a call, it is easier to act upon. When we keep God in our life, we are better people, and we have a stronger commitment to follow through with the prompting of God. Well, I found when I was getting ready for this week, there is so much material in this psalm itself. What do you anchor on? And it's always the living word. You find words that come out to you. So I prayed further and studied. And I'm just glad, again, that we are back in the Psalms. We're listening to each other's voices when they're being read, and we're just taking the time to just find the value of Psalms. Maybe again, and for some, maybe the first time. I hope that we will continue to go to the Psalms, to even put the Psalms on our to-do list for this year as something even to do daily. Maybe even to adopt the habit of ending our day with reading one. From Psalm 62, I hope we realize we have choices about how we can cope with what is going on around us. There will be times when we are shaky. When we communicate with God, let God know how we feel. Let God know what matters to us. Let God know what our needs are during any circumstance. We can rest assured that God will be holding us. He will be our rock, lovingly answering and lovingly holding us. The Lord is our salvation, the rock upon which we stand, the light by which we walk, the strength by which we overcome. Therefore, we shall live by faith and fear no one or no challenge. For the Lord our God is with us, sheltering us from harm. It is the Lord's song that we sing. That is why we have the psalm and many others. We sing just as David was able to during the toughest of times in his life. With faith, we can allow God's praise within our hearts, His words upon our lips, for this is the only reason that we live. Hear words from Psalm 62 again. Let all that I am wait quietly before God, for my hope is in Him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. Well, I will not be shaken. My safe place is in God, the rock of my strength. Trust in Him at all times. God is a safe place for us always and forever, because God is always waiting to lovingly respond to our needs. May this be so. Amen. It is my privilege to ask Ron Krager to come forward and share his testimony, and again, thank him for his service and his willingness, and thank him for my daughter, Jessica.
She didn't get her beautiful voice for me. Good morning, my church family, and Lily, thank you for those words of sharing and caring for our congregation. It was in the mid-50s that my brother Ken, age 16, was plowing in the evening along the creek. The wheel of the tractor got over the edge of the bank and the tractor went down into the creek. He told me that as the tractor rolled over down the bank, he fell between the tractor and the plow. As he was falling, he felt the plowshare sliding over his back. In 1971, he was a crop dusting pilot and had a plane crash. He had 50% of his body burned, with 35% being third degree. He was taken to the Tulsa Burn Center, where he spent 3 months recovering. While I was in the waiting room waiting to visit him, he and others were undergoing debridement and skin grafting. I could hear their voices screaming out with pain and suffering. I literally prayed that he would die so that he would not have to endure the suffering and put up with so much pain. He went ahead, healed, and recovered, and lived another 45 years. Thank God for unanswered prayers. In 1965, my farmer uncle, Judd, at age 51, was driving a tractor on a road next to a deep ditch. For some unknown reason, the tractor went off the side of the road and he was thrown in front of the rear wheel and was crushed and died. As my father was informing me of this loss, he wept. It was only one of 2 times that I ever saw my dad cry. It was in 1987 that my 2 nieces, aged 16 and 21, with a 16-year-old friend, were killed in a pickup wreck. This was devastating to our family. I was so angry and wondered how my God could let these beautiful, potential long lives be lost. It was my brother, the father of these girls, that helped me grow through this devastation and anger at God. He later wrote a poem that I'd like to share. The title is "The Girls on Loan from God." In a celestial meeting, the Almighty gave a nod and dispatched his host of angels to bring the girls on loan from God. They were sent into this world from that land that's free from sin. Dessa and Sarah came here to us, and George and Judy got Laura Lynn. We were such proud parents, and we loved them as our own, but we had to learn an eternal truth. They were only here on loan. We nurtured them from infancy to the first blush of womanhood. There were many trials along the way, but those days were oh so good. The brief and fleeting time we had to look upon each precious face was only an expression of God's enduring grace. When that day arrived for their return back from whence they came, our hearts were nearly broken as we yearned for our world to stay the same. But the Comforter came down to us and brought us to submission. He showed us that this was the plan, and the girls had filled their mission. My belief is that we parted when their allotted time was spent, and their departing situation was not an accident. God's truth is sometimes hard, and I must now confess that children are ours to love and train, but not ours to possess. And though they have departed to the great hereafter, this world is now a better place for having heard their laughter. And we rest in the assurance that when our last earthly steps are trod, we'll again be united with the girls on loan from God. Joe Krager. About 25 years ago, I went through a period of depression and hopelessness that at one point I considered suicide. I was taken in by Bill and Sheila Kirkpatrick and lived with them for a while. Through their love, friendship, and association, I obtained new hope and mission in life. Some people may say it was her cooking, but I'm sure think it was this association. When you look at Sheila, you probably see a pretty face. When I look at her, I see a halo. Sometime after this, Kent Dorsey asked me to be on the Pastoral Care Committee. You know, that is a committee for you to help the pastor deal with issues that may be of concern to them. For me, it was an expression that somebody in my church felt that I had something to contribute. Charles and Betty Thompson were the leaders of the committee, and I'm sure serving on the committee did so much more for me than what I contributed for the committee and pastor. This, too, gave me renewed hope and inspiration. A few years back, I was sitting with a friend one evening out in front of my barn. We started sharing some past experiences. He shared with me that at one time he was down and out, really low, hopeless point in his life, and he sat with a loaded revolver in his lap. He was thinking about terminating his life, and then something clicked. He knew he did have things to live for and loved ones to care for, and today he's one of my most admired friends with what he's done with his life since. About 10 years ago, I was pushing a tree over the edge of a creek bank with a tractor. As the tree went over the bank, it rotated and a limb caught the bucket and pulled me down. I was holding on the wheel with both hands and literally standing up on the brakes as it went down the creek bed. During those few seconds, I prayed, God, please not today. I got to the bottom of the creek, and the tractor had not flipped or rolled over. It was perfectly upright. Thank God for answered prayers. In the summer of 2018, I decided to close my office. I'd wondered what I might do with the extra time that I had. I thought about traveling or taking care of my cows, and I realized that that would just not be the fulfillment in life that I needed. I decided I want to continue to try and care for others, so I've chosen to continue to assist on surgeries, helping out at the hospital, serving in different capacities, and also to give time to care for and serve with my church family. In 2016, my son was diagnosed with chronic lymphocytic leukemia at age 45. In 2018, my 45-year-old daughter was diagnosed with breast cancer. I do not know or understand why we have these things in our life that tend to be stumbling blocks and hardships. But as in my brother's poem, I believe there is a plan, his plan. With the turmoil that our country is going through, I do continue to believe that we are in God's hands. Our case management nurse has a quote that she puts at the end of her emails that says, "Everyone is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. Be kind always." I know there are many of you out there that have been through or are going through some difficult times. I pray that you will give yourself some time to heal, to let hope return, and truly feel that you are in God's hands. We may be lowly sparrows, we may be a beautiful goldfinch, but we are part of God's creation. We do have the opportunity to be the disciples that we've been called to be. You're not alone, you're loved, and may peace be with you and yours. Amen.
God is holding your life. God is holding your life. God is holding your life. We believe. God is holding your life. Yes, God is holding your life. Oh, God is holding